Paramore is one of those bands that seem to have continued success even after some key members leave. It happens all the time in bands sometimes, but with Paramore, their lineup has been so unstable over the years that the only time they went into an album with basically the same lineup was their era of Riot and Brand New Eyes. Really the only difference in the lineup from Riot to Brand New Eyes was the addition of Taylor York later down the line, but even their first album had its fair share of lineup changes. We're going to go through all that and all the troubles that Paramore themselves have had to go through to kind of stay up, even in times when it looked like they were going to shut down and end up pretty much being forced to quit at this point. This is the story of Paramore. In 2003, Hayley Williams was about 15 years old, and she signed with Atlantic Records to basically be a solo pop artist. However, she detested and said, look, I'll sign here, but I want to make pop-punk music with an actual band. You know, I got friends and all this kind of stuff that enjoy this type of music. I think we want to be in a band. Atlantic Records gave in and whatnot. However, she did do this thing in 2003 called the Mammoth City Messengers, which is a lot like your typical early, pop music that you were getting from, Britney Spears and girl groups at that time. Just check this out. Pretty weird, I know, it's like a Christian thing that went on, but she slowly got out of that and focused on Paramore, who in 2005 released their debut album, All We Know Is Falling. Now there's something about this lineup that is different because it's weird to think that Jeremy Davis was and wasn't a part of this era, as mainly in that album you have Hayley Williams and Josh Farro, the main singer-songwriters on this thing, Hunter Lamb, who appeared as the replacement bassist for Jeremy Davis, who ended up leaving because he was 20 years old at the time and he thought it was weird that he would be in a band with a bunch of people who were under the age of 18. He just didn't think it would feel right. And then, of course, Zach Farro was still on drummer. They went in with those four in particular. It also seemed like All We Know Is Falling was going to be your typical, pop-punk and screamo album. As we all know in the song My Heart, Josh Farro comes through with screaming vocals at the end. But did you know that their biggest single from that album, Emergency, was actually supposed to feature Josh Farro screaming as well? Yes, they took it off when All We Know Is Falling, but when they released the Summer Tick EP in 2006, there was a version called the Crab Mix where Josh Farro screams throughout, Hayley Williams singing, and it's not that bad, but it's just interesting to think that Paramore was probably going to go screamo with their first album, but I guess decided to ditch it for a more pop-punk and emo sound is pretty interesting. However, Lamb would later leave the band after getting married, and Josh Hembry was in and out as touring guitarist and all this kind of stuff, and eventually Jeremy Davis returned to the band, but he wasn't there for long, as during the recording of their second studio album, Riot, after their debut album wasn't necessarily successful, but the singles did well in the pop-punk and emo scene, Jeremy Davis was expelled from the band, as Paramore likes to call it, as after a long talk, they just weren't happy with Jeremy Davis's work ethic, or lack thereof. He just would show up and apparently wouldn't do the job that he was asked to do, so they kicked him off the band, and he was out just like that. But then after giving it some consideration, the remaining members talked it out and allowed him back in the band, and that led to Riot being made. This was when things started to turn for the band a little bit, in good and bad ways. A little song called Misery Business came out in 2007. It was the first single for their sophomore effort, and it garnered airplay everywhere. People were loving this, and it was kind of new for the scene because when you look at the bands that were hot in that time, the pop-punk, emo, and scene times, there really wasn't a big female presence in there, and Hayley Williams, I think, brought that to people's attention and, was a big influence on a lot of females who were into the same type of music but were afraid to go through with it because they just didn't think they could be a part of that scene. Well, she changed that for everybody down the line. And all of a sudden Riot comes out, they become this big band, and other songs like Crush, 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 and That's What You Get hit it big on airplay. Here's the thing about That's What You Get. As around 2008, tension in the band started getting worse at this point in time. They did make Taylor York an official member around this time. He was credited on Riot, but was more still a touring member and just a behind-the-scenes songwriter at this time. And they said making the music video for That's What You Get actually brought the band back together, as they said they were pretty much hanging out at Taylor's house, made this video, brought people involved, and they had fun again. So they went on to their next record, Brand New Eyes, which would end up coming out September of 2009. And people were wondering how they were going to follow up this successful album. Well, with one that was arguably more successful and probably their best record to date, as this sold number 2 on the US rock charts in 2009, featuring some hit singles like Brick by Boring Brick and The Only Exception, which was nominated for a lot of awards. What made this album so great and perfect was that they used the tension in the band as an inspiration for the songwriting, as a lot of the songs are about each other. Ignorance, and you even look at the music video for Playing God, where she has, the guys tied up in the basement and is basically just saying she's fed up with the finger pointing, all this kind of stuff. And eventually that didn't go so well, as that was the last single released with Josh Farro and at the time Zach Farro, as both of them decided to leave, as Josh put out a statement stating that, he left because this was all just a ploy, as Hayley was being manipulated into thinking that Paramore was the start of her solo career, and that she was told to treat all of her bandmates just like, regular touring bandmates, because this was supposed to be her solo career, even though they were signed with Fueled by Ramen, and she was the only one signed with Atlantic. But whatever, the band responded, and they basically came along and said other things and said, yes, Hayley's signed to Atlantic, but in this situation, that's kind of irrelevant, and they left it at that. They didn't talk for years, and many speculations of what was going to happen with the band afterwards was, this and that, they're going to break up, they're going to add somebody else, this, that, and the other. But in 2011, Hayley Williams announced that the band was going to go on as a trio, which was Hayley Williams' own vocals, keyboards, and maybe backing guitars. And then you had Jeremy Davis, who was going to play bass, do backing vocals, and Taylor York, who was going to continue the songwriting and guitars and backing vocals as well on tracks, which means they were without a drummer from basically 2010 to 2015, and a guitarist as well, main guitarist, because for the last part of the Brand New Eyes tour they had to bring in guest guitarists and guest drummers to complete that tour. However, when they did say they were going to release new music in 2011, they didn't necessarily say it was going to be an album, and it ended up being a 4-track EP called The Singles Club, which came out December 14th of 2011, and it kind of had a mixture of different genres, as you had the lead single Monster, which was made for Transformers Dark of the Moon soundtrack, kind of be more, one of their more pop punk mixed with grunge kind of in there. It was an interesting track. And then you get songs like Renegade, which are more like synth leaning pop punk, and even a song like In the Morning, which is very Fleetwood Mac inspired. But the band did announce that they were working on their 4th studio album, and it would be out in early 2012. Well, that never happened. The album never saw the light of day in 2012. It got delayed plenty of times, and then 2013 hit, and in January of 2013, they released the lead single to what would end up being their 4th studio album, the song titled Now. And although people had mixed feelings on it, they were just happy the band was back and doing different things. Still as a trio though, no sign of a new drummer, but that's okay at this point. And then what was supposed to be an April, I think, 10th release ended up being pushed up to April 5th because of a leak of the album. So on April 5th of 2013, their self-titled album was released, and it's their longest album to date, featuring 17 tracks, 63 minutes long, and, well, we'll get to what it did for them in a minute. it really brought the band back together. As even though it was the same band, with the different sound and direction they went in, you felt like you were listening to a new and improved band like it had been missing for years, as they didn't necessarily ditch the pop punk, but it was more alternative rock and more pop in this type of way. Because you do get the hard-hitting songs, but yet again, you get the more pop-leaning songs like Still Into You and Ain't It Fun, which were the two biggest songs on the album. In this case, Ain't It Fun, I think, being their highest charting single to date. Things were going well. They toured. They announced their first ever Parahoy cruise around this time in 2014, 2015. But things weren't all sunshine and rainbows at that point in time. 2015, they do win a Grammy Award for Ain't It Fun being Best Rock Song of that year. And then Jeremy Davis had decided around that time as well that he was done. He was leaving the band, leaving only Haley and Taylor at this point, or as Haley would tell you, she actually left the band in the middle of 2015, basically, leaving it as Taylor York just kind of alone, kind of just going, what do I do now? Eventually the band would return, but still with a lot of problems going on, as they didn't necessarily have a third member. It was still Haley and Taylor, and Jeremy Davis decided to sue them because he felt like he deserved to get the writing credits from the past album, or more credits in this case, because he did a lot of help with the writing, and he thought he deserved the Grammy for Ain't It Fun, which, I mean, he's not wrong. He was a part of that song. He did help write that song. Therefore, I don't know why he didn't get his Grammy in the first place, but he said there was like a breach in the contract, and all that was going on, and that would be settled later in April 2017. But while all this was going on, Paramore was working on studio album number 5. No one really knew the direction they were going to take and what was going to happen, but it was seen that they were going to use the same producer as the self-titled, Justin Meldal Johnson, for this. Now, although they never added a bassist, as the producer Meldal Johnson played bass throughout the entirety of this new album, there was a return of a familiar face, as it surprised a lot of people that in June of 2016, a studio photo of Zach Farrow on drums appeared, leading many to speculate that he was back in the band. You know, maybe they had hashed things out, whatever, this, that, and the other. However, at first, Haley herself had stated that, you know, we did hash our differences with Zach and even Josh at this point in time, but Zach is just here as kind of like a fill-in drummer for the album. We might get other drummers to come in, kind of like what they did on the self-titled album. But then, in April of 2017, the first single for their 5th studio album, After Laughter, was released, and it was called Hard Times. And Zach Farrow appeared in that music video. And he's not just going to appear in that music video for shits and giggles. Obviously, at this point in time, they probably made the decision to bring him back in the band. He agreed, and now Paramore was a trio again. And although it was not necessarily the same as the self-titled, they still went in a more popular direction, seeing a more indie-type sound on this song, which caught a lot of people off guard. And then on May 12th of 2017, After Laughter was officially released to the public, to very, very good reviews from it. I've seen nothing but good reviews. Old school fans will tell you it sucks because it's not, you know, old Paramore, but it is what it is in this case. And although the only songs that really did anything from that album were Hard Times and Told You So, the first 2 records, it has some of their best singles to date, and it shows that the band isn't going anywhere anytime soon. And for the first time since the Riot and Brand New Eyes era, this is mainly going to be the first time that they have a consistent lineup going from one album to another, as after the After Laughter album cycle completed with touring in May of 2018, not only did they announce that from here on out they are retiring Misery Business, their big hit song from live settings, because Haley just doesn't agree with the sexist lyrics that are in it, and she basically canceled the song herself. No one else was complaining about it but her. That is what it is. But she also announced that the band would be taking a hiatus. A lot of people took this as they were, you know, breaking up, this, that, and the other, but people just don't know what the word hiatus means at this point in time. She stated that for the first time they actually felt like a band, and, you know, it was the first time that really nothing bad happened at this point, so they felt like, you know, why don't we take a break and do all these other things while we're, you know, at the peak right now of where we're at. But things weren't all sunshine and rainbows for Hayley Williams either, as after divorcing her husband Chad Gilbert in 2017, she started going through big big problem with depression, even stating in interviews sometimes that she would contemplate suicide. However, she would never go through it. I mean, if you listen to the song Hard Times, it's about wanting to go away forever, but not necessarily having suicide be the answer to that problem, and basically just go into hiding for a long time is basically what that song is. But you definitely see and the problems that she's going through throughout that entire album. And even recently, as this year, as toward December of 2019, Hayley had announced, basically on the day after her birthday, her 31st birthday, that she was going to make a solo album in 2020. This came as a surprise to a lot of people because she said she never wanted to go solo. As a matter of fact, she turned down a collab with Lil Uzi Vert, which, let's be honest, with as big as Lil Uzi Vert is, would have gained a lot of traction, but she just doesn't like being in that huge spotlight, and she's never really done a huge feature other than, okay, maybe the B.O.B. feature in 2010 where that hit big, but how was she supposed to know that? And yeah, her album Petals for Armor came out in May of this year to, again, very great reviews, and it kind of saw her take the direction that they had in After Laughter with a mix of a lot of different things, but you can definitely tell the difference from her stuff and Paramore stuff. And what makes this even better is that for a solo album and not, being a Paramore record, her bandmates were still involved. Taylor York did a lot of the instrumentation, produced the album himself, and Zach Farrow even appeared on some tracks doing the drums. So they're still on good terms, and heck, I think Taylor York was actually the one who said, look, you need to go through with this. You need to get some of those, musical, ideas that you have that won't fit Paramore. You need to put them on your own record with your own name, and I think that persuasion really got Hayley thinking, and she did it. And recently, she announced the cancellation of her Petals for Armor tour because of, the coronavirus pandemic that kind of ruined that for everybody. But now she is on a social media break, and sometimes she goes on social media break because of, just mental health, give that a break a little bit. But people are starting to speculate that maybe she's on a social media break now because Paramore might be starting the work on their 6th studio album, as many speculated that when the tour was supposed to go on this year and then probably all of next year for her solo tour, she said around that time, once her album cycle was over, she was going to go and start working on new Paramore music, as they said the band had really planned to, after her album cycle was over, do that. And she did state, too, that they look to return to more guitar-driven tracks. A lot of people think that means they're going back to pop-punk. I don't necessarily know, but it seems like they want to get back to more heavier type rock influence stuff that they were doing back in the day for studio album number 6. I guess we'll see when the time has come. But for now, she's on a social media break, leading many to speculate that maybe this means that Paramore is moving forward earlier than expected with studio album number 6. That could be, I don't know, maybe when the teasing starts, because you know how she loves to tease. Jesus Christ, teasing for her solo album was like trying to figure out this mystery of all this different shit, and it turned out to just be a full song and all this kind of stuff before the album came out. But, it is what it is. Paramore's had one of the weirdest histories ever, probably some of the most lineup changes in the history, at least the bands that I listen to. You'll have those bands where it's like maybe one big position, like for the most part, Bring Me the Horizon have had a steady lineup other than at bass player, and then adding Jordan Fish later down the line, and Asking Alexandria. Sure, in 2007 they released that Unknown album with Ben Bruce and a bunch of really unknown people, but the lineup that we grew to know from Stand Up and Scream, the only change that was made was when Danny Worsnop left. They brought in Dennis Stoff, and Danny Worsnop has since come back after Stoff left, so that's basically all you can really say with this. With Paramore, the only person that has appeared on all 5 of their studio albums was Hayley Williams herself, and Zach and Taylor are tied for second most with 4 records. That's basically it on a little Paramore history here. You can tell me in the comments below if there's something I missed, but for the most part, I felt like these were the important details going around. They gained a popularity, they peaked, and then bad stuff in the band started to happen, tensions grew, key members left, and twice they thought that this was going to be the end, including Hayley Williams leaving the band herself in 2015, only to re-up, regenerate, find a new sound, become this new band, and keep going, and it seems like they are ready for this next album to start commencing anytime soon. But yeah, that's it for me, guys. Hope you enjoyed this little special video, something like this that I've never really done before. If you want to see more videos like this, then comment down below. But until then, stay safe out there, and I will catch you all in the next one.